Hey everybody, welcome back. It is Vicksburg 160. Here we are along the Graveyard Road, opposite the Stockade Redan on the Union line here. And this is scene of intense fighting, famous actions on May 19th, 1863, May 22nd, 1863. We got more stories to tell than we possibly can, but we are going to try. Let me bring on Kris Mackowski, emerging Civil War and fellow for the American Battlefield Trust.
Garry, thanks so much. This is one of my favorite stories of the whole war. When we think about forlorn hopes, there are a lot of different assaults throughout the Civil War that could carry that name. I think of what's going on along the Rappahannock River on the 11th of December, 1862, as we're trying to charge across that river. I think about the 1st Maine at Petersburg on the 18th of June, 1864. The 1st Maine Heavy Artillery as they get hammered in their assault there. But really, this is the one that earns those capital letters, the Forlorn Hope, which is a name given to this assault by William T. Sherman. Sherman's men first arrive here as Grant moves in on the city on the 18th, and they're going to assault on the 19th. Remember, Grant has had a string of victories as he's moved inland through Mississippi up to this point, where he's had success at Port Gibson, at Raymond, at Jackson, at Champion Hill, at the Big Black. He wants to carry on that momentum and just keep pushing those Confederates and hopefully drive them away. So when he gets here, he launches these attacks on the 19th, trying to build on that momentum. And we can see this landscape behind me and just how tumultuous and violent this landscape is. And his men are going to assault from my left through this ravine that you can see behind me against one of the redans that's protecting this road, the Graveyard Road, into the city. It's one of several roads that goes into Vicksburg, all of them like spokes converging on the center of a wheel. And Grant's going to assault along a number of those spokes as he gets to Vicksburg. Sherman's Corps, the 15th Corps, is asked to assault here along the Graveyard Road. There's a redan, Stockade Redan, across the way that the Confederates are going to occupy that is protecting this road. And as Sherman makes those assaults on the 19th, his men will be repulsed. He's not going to have very much success. Grant's going to realize that these assaults on the 19th were pretty slapdash. He was going strictly on momentum. Momentum's not enough to carry through these miles and miles of Confederate works here. So he's going to try to re-strategize and come up with a second set of assaults on the 22nd. And we're going to follow those in. Those become what's known as the Forlorn Hope. One final story here on those the assaults from the 19th, and you'll have to pardon me as we try to navigate even this little stretch of the road because there are fire ants everywhere. The area where we were at was occupied on the 19th by some Illinois boys. They've got a 14-year-old musician named Orion Howe who is with them. He's on the front line, and as the shells are flying and the bullets are flying, the Illinoisians run out of ammunition. So they send Orion back to ask for more ammunition. And he is shot on the way, hit in the leg pretty seriously, but he gets all the way to Sherman. He asks for help. Sherman then sends reinforcements to the front, or sends ammunition to the front. Howe will ultimately earn the Medal of Honor for his actions under fire. Sherman will also write a letter of recommendation so he can get into West Point. He's too young, so he goes to the Naval Academy instead, and unfortunately he leaves after 2 years, goes on to a successful post-war career as a dentist. So that is the great story of Orion Howe, who's one of the youngest recipient of the Medal of Honor. See, fire ants everywhere.
Can I just jump in real quick? This has nothing to do with the Civil War and only its interpretation, and it's a shout out to the park. I've been here more than once, and you look out at the steepness of this. I'm not sure if it comes through on camera. It's a little more shallow over there, but specifically this area here, I have seen the maintenance crew here mowing this in mowers, not by hand, mowing it on the side on a power mower. And I was just waiting at the steepest sections for that thing to tip over. And I was staring. It was absolutely nerve-wracking watching these guys doing these hillsides and not even leaning into it. And I just couldn't believe it, and I couldn't pass this without mentioning this story, and a shout out to the parks for how much they do and work in order to keep these places looking so that we can imagine what happened in the past. Kris?
And that's particularly important in this particular spot because being able to see this ravine, you can imagine what it was like to assault on the 19th from the right to the left across this. It was just absolutely awful. So that's one reason why on the 22nd, Grant is going to change his tactics here. And rather than try to assault through these ravines, he's going to go straight down the Graveyard Road toward the tip of the Redan. Now, before they'd been kind of attacking the broad side of it, but the Redan is shaped like a big V, and now he's going to assault the V. I think about, again, the salient at Spotsylvania Courthouse. You want to attack that tip because you don't get as many enemy fire, you don't get as much enemy fire pointed at you. So what he's going to do, first of all, is send a party down this road to try to lay down some bridge work and ladders to facilitate the assault. He's going to ask for 50 volunteers from all 3 of the brigades in the 1st division that's going to push forward. That's going to be Frank Blair's division. Hugh Ewing's men are going to be in the lead, and what Blair's going to do is stack up his 3 brigades in a big column. Followed then by the division of James Tuttle. He's going to stack up his 3 brigades as part of that column as well. So we're going to have this big fist that is going to push down this road with those 150 volunteers plus 2 officers from each of those lead brigades as the lead element. And they know it's desperate work. The only people who are allowed to volunteer for this are men who have no wives or children at home. It's a suicide mission. That's why Sherman will call this a forlorn hope. Of those 150 men, the men in the lead are going to carry big planks that they're going to use to put across the ditch in front of the fort. The next 50 men are going to carry cross beams that they can then build a bridge. And then the final 50 men are going to carry ladders that then the assaulting column will be able to use to go up the side of this Redan. The attack's going to get started at about 10 o'clock in the morning, stacked up to push down through this direction. Defending the Redan is going to be the 30th Mississippi under Hebert, and we've got Francis Cockrell's Missourians. We've got the 1st and 5th Missouri in there as well. So as the forlorn hope gets out through this area, and we're walking through a road cut right now, and they've been under cover up until this point, but once they come out from this road cut, it's a mad dash of about 150 yards to the point of the Redan, which is going to be right in front of me. The Redan's got walls that are 17 feet high with a ditch about 6 feet deep in front of it. The battlements themselves are almost a dozen feet wide with a firing platform, so the Confederates have a good, strong position. And these men are going to come charging out of here, 150 of them, across this distance. We'll see here that on either side of us, we've got a ravine that drops off on either side. This is where they were assaulting the day before, or a couple days before, excuse me. But as the men get into this open area, they start getting shot down, and they start to litter the ground. In fact, of those 150 men, slightly more than a third of them are going to end up as casualties, either killed or wounded as a result of this. But then, as they get up, and some of them actually get to the Redan itself, they get their ladders down, they get those bridges built, and now Ewing's column has got to come out and make this assault. Leading the way for him is going to be the 30th Ohio. And as they get out into this area, they start taking heavy fire. And so they're going to litter this road. Now again, I can't stress enough, we got a bottleneck here because of this ravine. So with all of these casualties scattered on this road, the 2nd Regiment that comes out, the 37th Ohio, they see this bottleneck, the scatter of bodies across this road, and they take to ground. They don't advance. And as a result, it creates a complete bottleneck of that little road cut. So the 47th Ohio is coming next. They can't get through, so they're going to deploy on the hillside off to my left on the far side of that ravine. They're going to be followed by the 4th West Virginia. They're going to extend the line in that direction. So Ewing's got all 4 of his regiments deployed. They're stretched out. And now, as the rest of that big column, those 6 brigades that are coming through, the first one is kind of stretched out, scattered on the road. Now they've got to continue to push in that direction. So we've got Smith and Smith who are going to extend the line off in that direction, and things are going to start to bog down. Gary?
I want to give Kris a break, because let me tell you, walking and talking loud, it wears you out. They're very different things. I wanted to look around this way just to talk about, I've always imagined you know, we're not looking at a perfect identification of the works. The works were revetted, the works were more substantial, the works had headlogs often and everything like that. But I like to view this as the ditch right here, and you can imagine the men of the Forlorn Hope coming and putting planks sort of across this. It doesn't look like a whole lot now, Kris, but I'm not sure if that's been your impression, but I've always liked to stand there and imagine them sort of planking that area and building a bridge there, only to go up the 17 feet you were talking about.
Absolutely, and I think that that's really important, and you got this great view here. Now imagine as those guys get across this road, and instead of staying on the road, which then takes them straight across the face of the Redan and the face across Confederate fire, they're going to try to charge up here. So they build those bridges across here real quick, slapdash, get some ladders down. In fact, one Ohioan gets all the way to the top and plants his flag. Confederates try on several occasions to capture it from him, and they don't. But because of the way that this bottleneck has happened behind the camera in front of me, and these men are trapped on the face of the Redan, they're now stuck between Confederates firing in that direction and the rest of Ewing's brigade firing in this direction. And so it's kind of the worst place to be. They're trapped and they can't run the gauntlet. And so they're going to stay there throughout the day, taking pot shots, accepting pot shots. Confederates are actually going to roll cannonballs down and try to blow guys up by hand. Some of the guys that are trapped on the face of this Redan will catch those and throw them back up over. And they're going to have to wait this out. The fight itself lasts only about 2 hours. Cockrell himself calls it a desperate and prolonged assault, a prolonged effort to take our works by assault. But that assault lasts only about 2 hours, but these guys are going to be trapped here in that skirmishing and won't be able to withdraw until night. In the meantime, further down on the line, John McClernand's guys are going to get a lodgment and call to Sherman for help. And so Sherman's going to kind of keep this action up to pin these Confederates down while he shifts other troops. Sherman's going to have about 15,000 men, but he's only going to get about 1,000 of his men into this fight over the course of the day. So imagine just how desperate it is for these guys who are trapped here, unable to extricate themselves as these other things are going on down the battlefield. I want to bring in my friend Kris White here to add some cool stories to this.
Thanks, Kris. One of the things I want to do is just step over here for a minute. The idea of siege warfare is to try to get as close as humanly possible to the enemy lines. So you might start at a distance, but what you need to do is cut parallels, which will get closer. 1 parallel, 2, 3, and every step, think of it as going up a ladder, you'll get kind of closer to that enemy. Always watch for fire ants. So as we get closer and closer, we have to find different ways and innovations to do that. So we'll cut approach lines as well. And these are usually in a zigzag manner because you don't want to shoot straight down or give the enemy the opportunity to shoot straight down a line, which is easy to do. So you zig and you zag your lines and you're creating these deep cuts in the earth. So we pointed out in another video, you also have these things called sap rollers. Think about a steamroller that's going out in front, but not a steamroller itself, just a big wheel of earth sometimes, or of hay and straw or cotton that will go out in front. And the idea is to absorb fire while guys move in behind and dig, dig, dig. So we want to get as close as humanly possible. And up in this area of where we're standing near Stockade Redan coming out, what I like is that we have all of these blue War Department signs, tons of them. If you start to read Ewing's approach, Ewing's approach, Ewing's approach, what you're starting to see though is the length of this siege, because the signs that we start to see, we'll talk about these assaults that Kris was talking about. But if we flip around over here, we'll see one that talks about Ewing's approach and the end of the main gallery from Ewing's approach. What we're seeing here is a mining operation that's also taking place. The failure to take this position means we need to find an innovative way to to assault this position. What's another innovative way to do that? That is digging a mine, putting in here what they're calling about the gallery, the main gallery, which is simply a big room under earth, packing that full of 2,200 plus pounds of gunpowder, and then exploding the thing. So that's what we start to see coming out here in these different areas. So it's a crazy idea, you would think, but this goes back into ancient times. Another thing I like to point out is we're on the Graveyard Road. What does this lead past? The graveyard. So that's why it's named this. But it's important to know that of the 9 fortifications coming in and out of Vicksburg, most of them are placed along the main roads. 2 of them on the either side of the Jackson Road coming in from Jackson, 1 here at the Graveyard Road, and others. There'll be a large square fort that doesn't really protect anything but towards the center of the line, but we'll have fortifications all over the place. And the Confederates and the Union will have these men who are known as engineers. They're not guys who are running trains back and forth, but these are guys who are trained in mathematics, how to build things, and West Point was very much an engineering school prior to the war. So we have a lot of these engineers who come out here and help to lay out these lines. Well, not every regiment actually has an engineer with them, and many of these guys are farmers, machinists, other things coming out to go to war. And some of the Confederates who come out here from Tennessee and Mississippi, they're new to this, they're not very well trained, and they're told to dig a trench. And that's what they do. They start digging, and they're digging, and they're digging, and they're digging. And finally up comes an officer who looks down in this very deep trench that these Confederates now can't see over top of, so they're pretty well protected, but that doesn't do you any good if you need to defend a position. He looks down in there and he says, boy, it's going to get awful warm as you get closer to the center of the earth. So maybe you want to fill that back in, put some more of that dirt back in there so you actually see over the top of these works. So, you know, there's a lot of things happening out here, but before I turn it over to Kris Mackowski, I just want to point out we've come into the Stockade Redan on the Graveyard Road. We've changed from blue signs of Hugh Ewing's division, Hugh Ewing's men coming into here, now to red signs talking about some of the Arkansas, the Missourians, down the road, the Mississippians and Tennessee boys who are defending this area. So we're seeing that transition. And if you want to know how close that last tablet I pointed out to you was, here where we're standing is right here. Just over top of that earth, over top of the parapet, is that one saying there's going to be 2,200 pounds of black powder underneath this position.
And since we're talking about engineering, and I talked a little while ago about the construction of this fort, and we can see how wide this fort is up here, this Redan is. And Gary's been excited to come inside the Redan, so Garry Adelman, who's doing excellent camera work for us back there, has his chance to get in here. But look how wide the top of the platform is. So we've got a firing platform to stand here. We've got the crest. We can see down into that ditch and then through these ravines. So as the Federals were trying to attack this, you know, they were trying to navigate this terrible, terrible topography. From where we're standing, we can see where the Ohioans were trying to come down through there, created that bottleneck. And then so we have Giles Smith deploying over on that platform there. We have Thomas Kilby Smith deploying over there. And so they really can't do anything because of this ravine. They had terrible problems in the ravine on the other side on the 19th. So that's why things really kind of bogged down here. Now, these attacks were really important because looming off in some shadowy, spectre-y place in the rear is Joe Johnston's Army of Relief, which may or may not be coming. We know today they're not, but Grant is thinking that if he can get into the city quickly, he'll avoid being trapped between Pemberton's men here and whatever Joe Johnston might be doing in his rear. When he's not able to break through here, that's when we begin to settle into that 47-day siege and just wear these Confederates down. And Joe Johnston, off in the distance, someplace, rumors, innuendo, does nothing. And you keep saying like, hey, hold out, hold out, hold out. And Pemberton does. He's in a no-win position. So as a result, this siege will grind down and these Confederates will simply waste away over the course of that month and a half. So on behalf of my great friend Gary behind the camera, my great friend Kris, who's jumped in here, I want to thank you for watching today. Please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like button. Share this with your friends. Get the word out about everything that the American Battlefield Trust is doing to help preserve battlefields just like this. We're so glad to be here. We couldn't be here without your support. So please continue to let folks know about what we're doing at the American Battlefield Trust. I'm Kris Mackowski. Thanks so much for being with us here at Stockade Redan and the Forlorn Hope, and all you do for battlefield education and preservation.